My guest today is a brand new author. Her name is J.R. Lancaster, and she's just written a book called Someone's Always Watching, and it will debut this Sunday. And I have pre-ordered the Kindle edition. I'm looking forward to getting it in my hands. And so, Jessica, welcome to the Bookshelf Odyssey podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for pre-ordering.
Yeah. I hear from authors that that's a good way of telling the algorithm and Amazon that you're excited about a book. So
yeah. I'm learning all about that.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, this is like I said, your debut novel. So this is a whole new ballgame for you, it sounds like.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. It's a whole learning curve.
Yep. Oh, that's great. Before we get too much farther, I do want to ask, what have you been reading lately that you can share with us?
Well, I just finished a book recently called Blood and Moonlight, and it's actually a murder mystery, but it's also like YA and fantasy as well. So it was very interesting. Not something that I would typically pick up because I don't read a lot of like the YA murder mystery type, I guess, culmination. It's usually YA fantasy if I pick that up. But I really enjoyed it, and it was very, very different, and it had something from all different genres, so it kind of had something for everyone, but yet it still fit that murder mystery thriller vibe that I really enjoy when I'm reading.
Yeah. Now, do you have a favorite genre you usually read?
It depends. I go between cozy mystery. I do like that. And then occasionally, if I want something different, I'll pick up a YA. Or if I want something where I'm a little bit more on the edge of my seat, I'll go with a thriller. So it just depends on the author of the book and if it piques my interest. But there isn't a whole lot, I would say, that I really don't read. I'm not a huge romance reader, so that's probably the only thing I really don't pick up.
Yeah. Yeah, I've read a few romances recently, but it was on accident. Which I thought, I can't remember which one it was now. I think it was called Book Lovers, and it sounded like it would be, a book about books and people who like books and about reading, and it sort of was, but there is a big romance at the heart of it too. So I'm like, oh well, this is fine.
Yeah, I have read a couple that were really good, but they were like that. They were book related. It's been a while, but there's one, the Guernsey Sweet Potato Pie Society, I think is what it's called. And that one was really, really good. And it had a strong romance theme to it, but it had a lot of other elements that really pulled me into it. So that was one that I did enjoy.
Yeah. I haven't actually read that, but I did see the Netflix movie that came out a couple of years ago or so, and that was good. I liked it. So I was just looking up a couple books to kind of bounce off what you were saying about young adult mysteries. This past year or so, I had read One of Us is Lying by Karen McManus, which was really good. And then the Good Girl's Guide to Murder, I think it's like a trilogy. Those are really good. Have you read them?
I have, actually. Yeah. I just got approved for the third installment, like an ARC copy of the Karen McManus. Just got approved for that one, and so that's kind of on my up and coming TBR. And then isn't the other one a duology? Like, isn't there a second one for that? The Good Girl's Guide to Murder.
Yeah,
there's two out for that now.
I think there's three. Yeah, there's three of them. Yeah.
Okay, I've only read the first one of that.
Yeah, the first
but
one.
But I did enjoy that too.
I think I enjoyed the first one more than the other two, but it's not too bad. It's good. But I like the young adults because especially some of the ones being written today, they're not writing down to the kids. You know that this
Mhm.
is sometimes you can still hear people kind of be dismissive of YA fiction, and I'm like, no, you got to actually read it. A lot of it's really good.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I typically like the YA fantasy just because I feel like the authors that write for that, um, they they seem to be more lenient with like the storyline. You know,
Mhm.
it's almost and not all adult fantasy is like that, but the adult fantasy they kind of stop with the magical and the thinking outside the box and everything, and YA seems to be a little bit more inclusive of that, and like
Mhm.
they keep going with the imagination, and I really enjoy that.
Mhm.
And the fantasy elements, they're, I guess they play with the elements more is what I'm trying to say. So I think
Yeah.
that's why I enjoy that. um I did read a series and I wish I would have looked up the name of it. um I believe the first one's called In the Hall with a Knife, and it is a YA, but it is a play on the game of Clue, but it's like
Mm.
a YA version of it. And there's two of them out. And it was so good. I finished it in 2 hours. It was
Oh,
really, really good. And so if you like the board game Clue,
I
you
do.
would like that. Yeah. I really, really enjoyed that a lot.
In
It
the
was
hall
good.
with the knife.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
I gotta look that up because yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I joke that my podcast is just a clever way for me to build my TBR to, unimaginable lengths. So
Yeah.
this is great. Um, yeah. I haven't played Clue in a while, but that was one of my favorites. Yeah.
I
But
actually just told Jessica the other day there's another game that's similar to Clue that I came across. I used to have it as a kid. It's called 13 Dead End Drive. So if
mhm,
you like Clue, you should look that up. That game was a lot of fun.
okay. I know the name, but I don't think I haven't played it. So yeah,
It was
fun. Have you been a voracious reader, or are you kind of a casual reader? What kind of a reading life do you have?
I am a voracious reader. So, like right now, where I'm really, really busy, I'll pick up an audiobook before
Hmm.
I'll sit down and read a physical book, just because I can do that while I multitask, while I'm doing different things around the house or whatever. I have to read on a daily basis because that's kind of how I get my mind to settle down.
Hmm.
I'm very active, and so I guess the whole concept of an object in motion stays in motion. So that's the only way I can really slow myself down and relax and unwind to shut my brain off to go to bed, especially in the evenings. Um, so I probably read on average a book a week, and sometimes I can get two in. It
Mm,
just depends on if it's an audiobook or if I'm reading a physical book. It takes me longer with the physical book.
yeah. I would read about that rate, and then about 5 years ago or so, I really started getting into audiobooks. And now I got to be careful because I'll just devour one after another. And
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
I figured out this year I've already I don't know if this is terrible, but I've already hit 100 books this year.
Oh my
And
gosh, that's
I
awesome.
would say about 70 of those were audiobooks. I'd have to
We're
check
audio.
my stats, but I like to if I'm going on a walk, we have a really hyper dog, so I take her on walks. Doing yard work, driving. When I do the dishes at night, and I like to just put in an audiobook, so I just
Mhm.
listen to them a lot, and they're great. I and then my wife went and showed me that if the reader is really slow, you can speed it up a little bit, and
Yeah.
get through it a little quicker. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I do
that's
that all the time too.
yep. Okay, good. I'm normal then. That's
Yeah. Does your library have the ability, like, does it have the audiobooks? Because we have what's called Hoopla here.
hmm.
So you can, Hoopla or Libby, you can just jump on, like Evergreen, I guess, and you can jump on and you can borrow as many as you want.
Yeah,
That's what
yeah.
they have mine.
My wife is a part-time librarian
Oh,
here in our
cool.
town, so that's nice. And
Yeah.
then, but yeah, she actually showed me how to use Hoopla and Libby, and I just, finally the technology advanced to where it was convenient for me because I can have it on my phone instead of
Hmm.
like carrying around CDs and all that. Like,
Yeah.
and that just never appealed to me. So, but now it's on my phone. I mean, you can't get me off of it now. It's,
Yeah.
but oh well, it's good. But yeah, I've been able to, it's also been helpful if I, want to interview an author or something and read their book. I can, especially if I can get the audiobook, I can just zip through it and
Hmm.
try to sound intelligent about it. But anyway, but yeah, well, it sounds like I have there's a kindred spirit here and love for reading, so that's always fun to find. I don't know about you, but I was that kid going to the library and checking out as many as they'd let me.
That was me
Yep.
all the time. Yes. And actually, my grandmother lived in a very big, because we lived in a rural area. So our
Mhm.
library wasn't super big. And my grandmother lived in downtown Indianapolis, which is huge. And so her library, I mean, was like 3 floors. It was massive. And so she would borrow library books and bring them in addition because she could get her hands on books that I couldn't. So
Mm,
I always had an abundance of books to pick from.
that's nice. Yeah, I shared this story before, so I might cut this part out, but I tell the story all the time. But my grandma would buy me Hardy Boys books from yard sales and
Oh,
but just she just inspired my reading, so that's always fun.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I love finding not just writers but readers. I think reading is so important and it's good for your brain. So uh,
Absolutely.
yeah, as is writing. But let's talk about writing. So you're a new author. Your first book is coming out. You're mentioning that you're learning a lot. There's a big learning curve. I know you're excited. How did you get to this point? When did you start writing and thinking I want to be a writer?
Um, well, I've always had like an overactive imagination, and so that was always a lot of fun growing up, and I didn't really let go of that. So I always wrote like little stories, I guess, in notebooks for myself. I never really thought about being an author. I actually went into marketing
Mhm.
and sales, and I was in sales for over 13 years and did that for a long time. And then they did a layoff, and I had an opportunity to do a career change. And I thought, you know what? I had my daughter really young. So at that point, I wasn't really thinking, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? It was more, what can I do at this point, at this stage? So when it got to the layoff stage, then I had the ability to kind of sit back and think, okay, if I could do anything I wanted to for the rest of my life, what would it be? And an author was what I really wanted to do. So I started off, I went to college, I did my bachelor's, and then I did my MFA program, my master's, my MFA.
Mhm.
And part of that, our thesis was that you actually had to write the first 50,000 words in your novel. That was part of your thesis. So I came up with the idea for Someone's Always Watching because I am a huge fan of Agatha Christie and Midsummer Murders and Agatha Raisin and all of those. And I always grew up around garden centers and gardeners. My parents owned a garden center, my grandparents owned one. And then I lost both of my grandfathers shortly before I started college. So Basil himself kind of came from the two of them. He's kind of a little bit of both of them. And the inspiration was just that huge career change and having the ability to kind of, I guess, look at life a little bit differently.
Let's talk a little bit about your book then. This is according to the description, and I'll try to be careful about
Mhm.
spoilers. But it says Basil Billingsley has dedicated more than 10 years to flying under the radar of everyone in Badger's Hollow. He employs Mrs. Green to do his bidding while he sets to work with clients far from prying eyes in the village. He answers to no one, and there isn't a soul alive that relies on him either. Everything was perfect until it wasn't. Now, a decade later, the killer has struck again, and Basil is forced to revisit the unsolved murder of his mother. Torn between love and lies, Basil must sort out his feelings before it's too late. Old habits die hard. Will he break them to save his friends, or will solitude call him home? So that sounds very, very intriguing. I'm really looking forward to getting this. Um,
Thank you.
so tell us a little bit about the book. Spoiler free, please. But um,
Sure.
what can we expect going into this?
So obviously from the book blurb, you can gather Basil's basically a recluse.
Mhm.
I won't tell you why, but he spends a decade, like I said, in solitude, and he likes it that way. He's just happy, and he just likes things to be exactly the same. He is basically thrust into the midst of this murder investigation, and he drags his heels the entire way. And the detective who is leading the investigation is actually the polar opposite of him. Very, very charismatic and extroverted. So they butt heads a lot. So you can really expect to see a lot of banter between the two of them, going back and forth. And then, Mrs. Green, she just kind of wants to be in charge of everything, kind of like the mother hen. So you're going to see a lot of her, a lot of Basil really digging his feet in because he just wants her to back off and leave him alone because
Mhm.
he wants things to stay the same. He doesn't want all of this change, but he inevitably has to, face, the thought of his world being turned upside down and how he's going to move forward with that. While also hoping that one day he might get some sort of closure with what happened to his mom.
Mm. Oh, now is Basil? Is he an older character or
Basil
younger?
is actually set in his mid 30s.
Okay.
Yeah. So you'll kind of get a little bit more backstory on that, but he's set in his mid 30s and he has a job in horticulture. But
Mhm.
because obviously, with as technologically advanced as we are these days, he's able to do a lot of his work from home and not actually have to travel. But when he does, he doesn't really deal with people directly in the village. It's always people he doesn't know or don't know anything about him. So
Mm.
you're going to see a lot of plants. There's a huge gardening theme involved, and it's actually set as the village is preparing for the foliage festival, which is more for book two because this is a
Mhm.
series.
Okay.
So there's lots of all of that involved.
Yeah. Would you classify it then as like a closer to a cozy mystery or a thriller, somewhere in between?
I've from my beta readers, I've really gotten a lot of feedback. Um, I would classify it more like a classic mystery. So it's
Hmm.
got thriller elements, but it's very clean. It's not, you've not got like a lot of profanity. There's not a huge gore element. And at the end of the novel, I hope that it leaves people feeling good and not it's not a downer. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like some
Yeah.
thriller can leave you feeling a little down after you finish it. And hopefully with the way that I've written it, people don't feel that way at the
Right.
end. So kind of in between.
Okay. Yeah. No, that sounds about right. Um, yeah, I know what you mean. I like thrillers, but I like a thriller with a happy ending, which doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Or justice or even just like feeling
Yeah.
like things got wrapped up and there's not like a bunch of loose ends.
Yeah.
There's hope.
Right. Right. Well, Basil sounds like a character I would enjoy spending time with. Well, separately, of course, in our own
Mhm.
rooms. And
Yeah.
um, I tend to be an introvert myself, and then my wife is like you were saying, she's the polar opposite. She's
Mhm.
very outgoing. Um, but yeah, when you're describing him, enjoying solitude and liking things to not change and all that, that's exactly my outlook. Um,
Yeah.
this is terrible because like during the pandemic when we were all inside, I'm like, is it wrong that I'm really enjoying this? You know?
Yes.
Yeah, it's probably
Yes.
I don't advertise it that too loudly, but yeah, yeah. Um, well, and then so you mentioned this might be an ongoing series. So
Mhm.
that's exciting.
Yeah.
Do you plan like ahead, or are you just kind of seeing how the first book goes? And
I actually put about half of the first chapter from the second book is in the epilogue.
mm,
So you get a glimpse at the direction of the second novel at the end of that epilogue and when I kind of wrap things up a little bit. But I've been a total pantser thus far. Jessica and I were actually talking about this on a live earlier today. It didn't serve me well to pants the novel because consistency and big picture, and there were just lots of things that needed tidying up. So for the second novel, I am planning it. And so far, right now, I don't have kind of a plan of how many books I would like to have. I think I'm just going to keep on with Basil's story until there's nothing left to write,
mhm.
whenever that might be.
You're kind of in between now, a pantser and a plotter, I guess. Is that kind of where the direction
Yeah.
you're heading, huh?
Yes. So you had asked me earlier how long it took me to write this book.
Uh-huh.
I started this book in 2019. So
Okay.
4 years. And the reason that it has taken me so long was because with not planning any of that out, I ended up with things like the original, one of the victims' name was Rose. His mom's name was Rosemary, and he lived in Rose Cottage. And it was like I didn't see all of that because I was looking chapter by chapter. I wasn't looking at the big picture. And then when I realized what I had done, I, of course, not thinking about it, went back and did the find and replace. So then when I changed things, then it messed up all of that. And then I had to go through line by line and correct all of that. And then I had the inconsistencies because, oh, well, this person's dog, this is what happened, or this person, this was their backstory. And because I didn't write that down, I didn't remember
Mm.
that as I was going. So I had a lot of fixing that I had to do. And I basically had to go back and outline it after I'd already written the book so I could fix what needed fixing. So I won't be
Wow.
doing that again.
Right. So you have a little bit of a better idea going into book two.
Mhm.
You've were able to learn from that. That's cool.
Yeah.
Um, Now, so you are publishing, sort of self-publishing this book, you had
Mhm.
said, through your creative agency. You want to tell us a little bit about that and what you do
Yeah.
there?
So I have a creative agency. By trade, now I'm actually an editor for a newspaper. And when I started with the writing, part of being an author is developing a brand and marketing and putting yourself out there and doing all these things. And so I had to learn how to do that. And a lot of it I really enjoyed doing, the creating graphics, figuring out a logo, well, my color scheme, all of those types of things. So I ended up, along the way, I've picked up clients that I have created newsletters for. I have some that I've done resumes and cover letters for. I have some that I have done editing for. So I just basically took all of these freelance services and put them under an umbrella of a creative agency. And that's how Musings and Company was born. So I offer a little bit of everything, and now I also publish under that umbrella as well.
Hmm. That's great. And yeah, I guess at the end of the day, you're your own boss, and that's That'll be fun.
Yeah, it is. It's not without its challenges, but it's a lot of
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I like that, our I guess the way things are right now, it's very easy for somebody to publish their own book.
fun.
If and you got to make sure you do it right, get the beta readers, the editors, and make sure like other people see things that maybe you don't, like all the roses you were mentioning. You know
Yeah,
that that's so important, but it's great that, if you have a dream to be an author, you could just pretty much, if you have the energy and drive to go out and do it yourself. Yeah.
yeah. I like that you can make it work for you,
Hmm.
whatever that may be. Like when I first started, I was dead set. I was never going to self-publish because having even been in marketing, I will tell you, it's great. You do have a background, but it is not the same. And I have found that I am incredibly awkward trying to market myself. But if you give me someone else's stuff, hey, I can talk about that and promote it like nobody's business. That's great. But I'm not comfortable yet with putting myself out there, and
Hmm.
so that's a learning curve. But you can fit it to whatever works for you.
Hmm.
Um, like I said, I was going to traditionally publish, but then when I found out that it didn't really matter if you traditionally publish or self-publish, you're still marketing for yourself because that was kind of the big thing, that assumption I had was that someone would be doing that part for me. Then it kind of freed me up. I was open to more options, and now I'm doing the polar opposite of what I intentionally set out to do in the first place. So
Yeah, that's great. You never know really where you're gonna end up when you start off on something. Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, I also I like to talk about just some writing tips, some things that might encourage other writers. Uh, and I know you're still relatively new, but what are some things you've learned along the way that you find to be just valuable information?
so like I said, you don't have to be a planner, but write down your characters. Give them a little bit of a backstory. Keep a notebook, even just somewhere with tidbits that you can refer back to. I be open to unconventional ways of working. For instance, I never would have considered a Spotify playlist or a Pinterest board, but those have been two of the biggest tools in helping me on those days when I don't want to sit there and write. My head's not in the game, is going back to and getting that visual of, okay, remember, this is what that looks like, and it will spark those feelings that you need in order to keep that consistency in the tone throughout the novel.
Mhm.
And then the biggest thing that I learned is don't let anyone tell you that there is a right or a wrong way to do it, because every single author's journey is entirely different. Your process is different. That's going to develop over time. You're not going to have that right away. And there just is no right or wrong way to do it. You're going to pull bits and pieces from things that work for so many different people and figure out exactly what works for you. And that will come over time.
Hmm. Yeah, I that last bit of advice is good on anything you tackle. It really.
Yeah.
Uh, I I got a chance to teach some kids at the library today about drawing. I'm not an artist. I've always doodled and drawn my almost my whole life, and since my wife, was needing some library program ideas, I said, how about I teach a drawing class to the kids? But that's what I told them is when I started, I was like copying some of my favorite artists like Jim Davis and does Garfield and things like that. And eventually from that, I was able to develop my own style. But I needed to
Mhm.
learn the basics from those guys who are the masters, really. Uh,
Yeah.
and and then you take it and make it your own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I took only one class that I didn't care for in my MFA program. And sadly,
Hmm.
that professor basically was trying to really drive home that there was a right way and there was a wrong way to your process. And if you weren't following these steps, you weren't going to achieve the same goal. And all you have to do is look online, look at all the greats. Agatha Christie had her own way of doing things.
Hmm.
Sir Arthur Conan Doyle did it a certain way. And then you've got Harlan Coben. He does it his way. Everybody is so different. And the piece of advice they're going to give you is very
Hmm.
different.
Hmm.
So you just take what you can and use what you can
Hmm.
and leave the
Yeah.
rest alone.
What's great about Agatha Christie is she, especially, and I haven't read all of her yet, but she could follow the rules of the mystery genre, but
Mhm.
then there's some of her books where she breaks the rules.
Yes.
And those are the fun ones. you
Yes,
know
I actually just read an article recently about the society that they had.
hmm
It actually is still in existence today, but the Mystery Writers Society that they formed at the time. And she was the very first one that didn't adhere to the 10 commandments of writing a mystery that they all had agreed upon when they originally formed it.
yeah. That's great. But whose books are we still reading today?
Mhm.
So
Exactly.
yeah, find your style. And um when you create, I mean, it's a lot of it is subjective anyway. What do
Yeah.
you like? What resonates with you?
Mhm.
And there are famous authors that I just don't care for. I don't like their style, but that's fine. Others apparently do. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, look at J.K. Rowling. How
hmm
many times did she turn down with Harry Potter before a publisher actually picked her up and said, wow, this is good. We could do
yeah,
something with this. I mean,
right,
people actually told her that Harry Potter was trash and it was never going to make any money.
yeah, yeah. Now
They're
she,
not going to be for everybody.
now she just laughs at them, and from a big pile of money.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So you never know. You might have the next Harry Potter in you somewhere. So
Mhm.
go for it. Anything else you want to share about writing in general, or
The only other thing that I do want to say that I wish someone would have told me in the beginning and not just now, in my writing process is
Mhm.
that you are free to pick up what you want. Like if you have beta readers who are giving you advice on your novel,
Mm.
just because someone gives you advice on to changing something doesn't mean you actually have to do it. At the end of the day, it's your creative piece, and you decide if you want to make that different. Just like with your artwork, someone
Mhm.
might tell you, hey, you need to make his eyes further set apart. But if it looks right and it feels right for what you were personally trying to create, you might decide not to do that. Writing is exactly the same thing. And just because someone says, hey, you should probably change X, Y, and Z, stay true to what you're trying to create.
Mhm.
Sometimes the feedback is amazing. You should always be open to hear what people say, but that doesn't mean you have to implement it.
Mhm. Yeah, that's I've had a chance a few times to be beta readers for some of my friends have written stories, and I I I just recently said I would for another person I know, but I really don't like being the beta reader, because I told my friend just recently, I said, I'll be honest, I'm probably gonna love it, even if it's trash. I'm like, I I really have a hard time being critical like that, because
Mhm.
this is their story and it's coming from their imagination. And part of me is like, well, who am I to say this is bad or this is wrong and this is right? So I try to be a little more general. But yeah, as far as beta reading goes, I don't pick me.
Don't make it.
I'll
We had to do that in class in our MFA program.
uh-huh.
Every single class you had, you were reading a section, and you would lose points if you didn't give people constructive feedback, or if your feedback was just way too general and wasn't actually answering their questions. But what was helpful was the first couple classes we had where you did that, we were actually required as we submitted a piece to say, I would like feedback on this particular thing. You know, how's the pacing? How's the flow? How's my tone? How is the storyline? And we had to be specific. So it taught us really to look at elements specifically and then look past things that don't matter, because like you said, you're not for everyone. So there were books that I picked up that I was like, this isn't a book I would read. I have to for school, and I am trying to be helpful, but it's not something I would actually just pick up to read and enjoy. And those ones were hard to give feedback on because it wasn't your type of book to begin with.
Oh, you know what I've come to hear from authors is that, you know, in spite of all this, these groups can be very, very beneficial, especially if they're people you trust, you know, where you can say, I'm really struggling with this scene. Can you help me out? Or is this making sense to you? You know, and trust you're going to get an honest feedback. Um, I still laugh. I can't remember which guest it was now, but she said, yeah, don't give your mom your manuscript to critique, because she's going to love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And don't give your manuscript. If you're picking beta readers and you're selecting people, make sure it's people that read your genre.
Yeah.
Because if your major concern is, hey, does this really fit the tropes? Are my readers going to feel like their expectations were fulfilled? If it's not someone who reads mysteries, they're not going to have a single clue.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Just
it's
like I would never make a great romance beta reader because I don't read romance.
Right. Yeah. And that's, yeah, the same, you know, and I like to joke that I'm a bit of a prude. So, some of the romance stories, it's like, oh, that's unnecessary. Okay.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, but, yeah, so finding that community can be very helpful to you. Something I've encouraged before, and I think it's worth saying again, you know, check your local library if they have a writing group. And if they don't, then maybe start one. You'd be surprised. My wife goes to one in a town near us. We're in a small rural town, but there's a bigger library, and she goes to a writing workshop there, or it's like a writing group, and that's basically what they do. They learn a new technique and they write stories and they read it. And I don't think any of them are looking to be published or anything. They just enjoy writing stories, and it's a great community to do that. Yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you don't get better if you don't write anyway. So it's perfect if you can find something where you can even just work with a prompt here and a prompt there.
Yeah. Yeah. I know these last few years, you know, we've when we had a lot of time inside and all that, you know, my wife encouraged us to read or to write stories, and that was some of the most fun we had. Is like during the day she gave us a writing prompt, and then that night we got together to read, you know, these little short stories we came up with, and that was a lot of fun. And I feel like maybe we should have kept doing that, but
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
I homeschool my kids.
Okay.
So we actually, sorry, I'm trying to plug myself in here. We actually, as part of their homeschool curriculum, is that they do a creative writing. And so there are these really great books that we picked up that each page has a prompt at the top, and then you write a story based on the prompt. And every day is something just totally different, and you can go any direction you want with it. And the kids have had a lot of fun with that. It was harder for my 17-year-old to get in the habit of doing that again. But my 11-year-old, you know, his imagination is still all over the place. So he just like picked it up and ran. But it was a lot of fun. And it was fun to go back and see kind of where their mind went with just that one sentence or two sentences that they had for the day.
Yeah. Yeah. We've homeschooled our kids until just recently. Two of my three have gone to public school, but my middle son, he just graduated from homeschool, and
Oh, cool.
He we did that. Do you guys do like NaNoWriMo or anything?
We do
Yeah.
actually. Yeah, my son, my daughter is more of a computer whiz,
Hmm.
so she's not really necessarily into the creative writing unless it's forced upon her. But my son is very, very much into it, and I think
Cool.
that's fantastic. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, both of my boys especially really got into writing stories. Even like seventh and eighth grade, they loved doing NaNoWriMo. They'd set themselves a daily word count and they would just you know write, and it was so good for them. It's a something that is helpful. My oldest son, he's in college now, and you got to do writing in college, and just being able
Yeah,
to express yourself in and express yourself creatively is such an important skill.
it really is. It is. And it helps them. Um, it helps me to just learn new words or look at words that I feel like I overuse and try to find something a little bit more creative. It really expands your vocabulary and it just
Hmm.
keeps you sharp.
Hmm.
So
Definitely. And you really get an interesting look into your kids' minds too. which,
yeah, you do.
which like,
Some days
oh
are scarier than others.
yeah, see, you got a lot going on in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and then so looking ahead into the future, you've got hopefully some more books coming out about Basil and his adventures, huh?
I do. Yes.
Awesome.
So I have started that. And I actually just finished up some short story for an anthology that is launched on Kindle Vella this week and comes out in paperback in October. And then I'm actually in the process of writing a YA fantasy. I don't know if I'll ever do anything with it, but
Mhm.
it is a lot of fun to write. And it's just been something that's been on my mind for a while. So I'm going to try my hand at that too.
All right. Yeah, and if I mean, worst case scenario, nobody else reads it, right? and
Yeah.
it was a writing exercise for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, everyone, this will wrap it up today. I feel like I need to tell you all to go and turn your phones off and pick up a pen and write a story now.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely.
Well, Jessica, thank you so much for being on the show. Do you have a website that people can go to find out about
Yeah,
more about you?
I do. It's jrlancaster.com. And then I also have an author page on Amazon.com where the pre-orders and the book will be available in paperback, but pre-orders for the ebook are already live for that
Right.
too. So
Yeah.
yeah, I've got info
Yeah.
there.
All right. Great. I will have those links in the show notes. And as always, I'll try to put down all the titles we talked about in this episode. Well, thank you for coming on, and everyone go and buy your book. It sounds like it's going to be a good one. So,
Thank
all
you
right.
for having me.
You bet. Jessica, thanks for being on.